Welcome to our study today. We're going to look at the factorization method as one of the methods to help us solve quadratic equations. So we'll go straight into the example. I will show you where the product rule really comes into play. So solve the following equations by factorization. So what you have is a quadratic equation, and if you're going to solve by the factorization method, then there's need for you to find the product, and this product is simply a times c. Remember, the general equation of the quadratic equation is ax squared plus bx plus c. We have equal to 0, so we equate that one to 0 as well. So if we're going to solve an equation of this sort, then you find the product simply multiplying a times c, and then we find the sum, which we get as our b. In this case, in our example, our a is 1, the coefficient of x squared, and our c is negative 6. Don't forget the sign just for the number that you're picking. So times negative 6, and this will give us negative 6. 1 times negative 6. Our b is the coefficient of x, and the coefficient of x there is negative 1. Always be conscious with the signs. So we have our product as negative 6 and our sum as negative 1. So using the product, get the factors of negative 6, which when you add, you get the sum, which is a b, negative 1. And those two factors, if you multiply them, you get negative 6. You'll find that it's 2 and negative 3. If I multiply 2 times negative 3, I'm going to get negative 6. If I add 2 plus negative 3, I'm going to get negative 1. After you identify those two numbers, you then express this quadratic equation in terms of these two factors, replacing the b. What I mean is you're going to have x squared. Now, instead of having negative x, you're going to have plus 2x, the first term that you have there, minus 3x. Knowing so well that 2x minus 3x will get us back to negative x. So the equation hasn't been changed in any way. Minus 6 is equal to 0. So that you factor out what's common between the first two terms first, you find that it's x. So if we get x out, we're going to have x into x squared is x, plus x into 2x is 2. You close your brackets. Then again, you factor out what's common between the last two terms. So you kind of group them in twos. And between the last two terms, what's common is minus 3, which is equal to negative 3 into 3x is x. Negative 3 into negative 6 is plus 2, which is equal to 0. Notice that whatever you have in the brackets is the same, and that's your aim all the time. If you're going to use a factorization method, always factor out in the sense that whatever remains in the brackets should be equal. So we proceed. You're going to have what's in the brackets is x plus 2. We close. Then we write what's outside the brackets in their own bracket. We're going to have x. What you have there, it's minus 3 is equal to 0. You have factorized your quadratic equation, but then the question is not asking us to factorize but to solve. Now the product rule comes into play. If this times that should be 0, then it's only possible if x plus 2 is 0 or x minus 3 is 0. So let's have those assumptions written down. X plus 2 should be equal to 0, or x minus 3 should be equal to 0, or both of them should be 0. That's the only way. If you multiply them, you get the answer of 0. So if we're going to solve this, it only implies that x is equal to, the 2 comes that side, or you subtract 2 on both ends, you're going to have x is equal to minus 2. You have found your first answer. Then equally for this one, you're going to have x is equal to 3. So you have solved. Your answers being x should be negative 2 or x is equal to 3. So for our second one, you need to rearrange it first for you to have a proper quadratic equation. So you're going to have 9y squared plus 6 is equal to 15y. So the 15y crosses over. You're going to have 9y squared minus 15y plus 6 is equal to 0. So notice we just rearrange them. This one comes inside and takes its place, which is in the middle of the two terms. We're going to have minus 15y. The 6 is positive, and I've maintained it's plus 6 this side is equal to 0. Now notice that if we're going to get the sum and the product straight away, we're going to really deal with big numbers. So the numbers themselves allow us to divide or to reduce them, because 3 can go into 9, 3 can go into 15, 3 can go into 6, and 3 can go into 0. So let's divide throughout by 3. We're going to have 9 over 3 y squared minus 15y over 3 plus 6 over 3 is equal to 0 over 3. That way 3 into 9 is 3y squared minus 3 into 5 is 5y plus 3 into 6 is 2, which is equal to 0. Now we are dealing with much smaller numbers. And in this case, our product is 6 and our sum is minus 5. So we look at two numbers. When we add them, we get negative 5, and when we multiply, we get positive 6. You find that the two factors of 6 which will give us that is negative 2 and negative 3. If it's negative 2 minus 3 will give us the sum, and negative 2 times negative 3 will give us 6. So we have our terms. We go back to rewriting our quadratic equation in terms of negative 2 and negative 3. Actually, you can use this one, which we have reduced. So we're going to have 3y squared minus 2y minus 3y. We replaced our b completely with these two factors, including multiplying them by y, so that we can always end up with what we have in the first place. So 2 just have a y, negative 3 just multiplied by y as well. Then plus 2 is equal to 0. Now we have what we want. Let's factor out to get what's common from the first two terms. We're going to have between 3 and 2, we're going to have y is common. So y into 3y squared is 3y minus y into 2y is 2. We close our brackets. Remember, all the time is for us to always have what's in the brackets to be the same. So we have to be smart in our factoring out. The 2 has to be negative. If that's the case, then we factor out the negative from the last two terms. So minus 1 is common in the last two terms, so that negative 1 into 3y will give us a positive 3y, and negative 1 into 2 will give us minus 2, which is equal to 0. Again, we write what's in the brackets once. We're going to have 3y minus 2. Then we write what's outside the brackets as it is in one bracket. So we have the y and the minus 1. So y minus 1 in one bracket, this is equal to 0. And if we use our product, sum and product, if we use our product rule, we're going to have that 3y minus 2 is equal to 0, or y minus 1 is equal to 0. Let me create some space for the final answer. Let me just rub this. So now 3y minus 2 is equal to 0 implies we have 3y is equal to 2. We divide both sides over 3 because what we want is to have y is equal to, or making y the subject of the formula. So we're going to have y is equal to 2 over 3, or we have the other part there, which is y minus 1 is equal to 0, and this will imply that y is equal to 1, and you are done. So for our last example, using the factorization method, we solve x minus 3 in brackets, then we square everything is equal to 4. So whenever you have an equation of this sort, first of all, work out the brackets. So we're going to have x minus 3 squared is equal to 4. For this one, by now I'm sure everyone has their own method that they use which they find easy to work out a square of any equation. I prefer the property a plus b squared is equal to a squared plus 2ab plus b squared. I like using that one because it doesn't take up a lot of time. You square the first term, then you multiply 2 times the 2 terms that you've been given in the brackets, then you square the second term as well. So in this case, our a is x, so we square x squared plus 2 times our a is x times x, and times b, our b is negative 3. Don't leave out the sign. Plus squaring the b is negative 3 squared. So you square the first term, then you square the second term here, then you multiply 2 times the 2 terms that you have. So you're going to have x squared minus 6x plus 9 is equal to 4. That way we can now subtract 4 on both sides, or have the 4 this side. We're going to have x squared minus 6x plus 9 minus 4 is equal to 0. Then I'm going to have x squared minus 6x plus 5 is equal to 0. Now we have a quadratic equation. So we identify our product, which is 5, and our sum, which is negative 6. So we look at the factors of 5, 2 factors of 5, which when we add, we get negative 6, and when we multiply, we get 5. We get positive 5. You find that it's negative 1 and negative 5. So I always avoid using the comma because it looks like a coordinate. Negative 1, 5, negative 5. So, and negative 1 and negative 5. So I add these 2, I get negative 6. I multiply these 2, I get 5. So now I rewrite my quadratic equation using the 2 factors that we've identified. We're going to have x squared minus x minus 5x, then we have a plus 5 there, don't forget it, is equal to 0. We factor out what's common between the first 2 terms. You're going to have x minus 1. We want to have minus 1, so again we have to be smart when factoring out our 5. We factor out the negative so that our x can remain positive as in the first bracket. So we're going to have x minus 5 into 5, negative 5 into 5 will be negative 1, is equal to 0. So we have these in the brackets looking the same. We've achieved our goal. So we write what's in the brackets once, we group what's outside the brackets in one bracket, is equal to 0. And this is only true if x minus 1 is equal to 0, or this term here, which is x minus 5, is equal to 0. And x minus 1 is equal to 0 simply means or implies that x is equal to 1, or this side you're going to have x is equal to positive 5. That way you are done. You would have solved your question using the factorization method. Thank you.